A surreal scene was playing out in the hallway of an active construction site that is the headquarters of the Federal Reserve this afternoon. While donning white hard hats, President Trump stood next to the object of his ire for the last several months. That is the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, who has resisted the president's repeated demands that he lower interest rates. Within minutes of the president arriving on the scene here, we saw them in the hallway where there was a remarkable moment between the two of them, where initially Powell had stepped out of the camera frame, just to note as you're about to see this, when Trump ushered him back in. Then, as the cameras were rolling, Powell pushed back on the president's assertions about the price tag of the central bank's renovations.
So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
Our notes had it about 3.1 as well.
3.1.
3.2.
This came from us?
Yes. I don't know who does that.
Are you including the Martin renovation? You just added.
Our entire capital plan.
Yeah, you just added in a third building is what that is. That's a third building,
Well,
including
no,
the
but
Martin building.
it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
40% over.
It's part of the overall work.
But it's
So,
not new.
The tour continued, and back at the White House afterward, I asked the president's deputy chief of staff and his budget chief about that exchange right there. Who is responsible for giving the president accurate information about what the cost is? Because Fed Chair Jay Powell was correcting him on live television.
No, he wasn't. What the president pulled out of his
They
pocket.
had two different numbers, is my point.
The president pulled out of his pocket a page from the FOIA request of the Fed's own internal documents that is available on their website.
So
It's
when he's
available
saying there's
for
a third building, you're saying he's wrong?
No. What the president is saying is the entire construction project that's going on, which is a build and renovation project over the last number of years, is currently at $3.1 billion. And what the Fed chair was saying was, no, you have to take one of the buildings out of it. Well, no, it's all one project on the whole complex.
Why do you disagree with that? If the building was already done and it's not part of what your issues are right now?
I don't know what you're saying. If you go back and look, and the president's looked at the forms, they're right there. You can see every single year. They put out the FOIAs for every single year. And every single year, the numbers have gone up for this project.
What number? So you're saying that the number Jay Powell gave was wrong and the one the president had is accurate in your assessment?
I think what the Fed chair is doing is splitting hairs in that moment to try to drive down the top line costs for what we're talking about.
We can't be sure, but this appears to be the document that the president handed to Powell today. It shows the cost of several different projects and programs that we have here. I should note that is on the Federal Reserve's website when you look at their budgets and their analysis for the next few years. Joining me now is CNN Global Economic Analyst and Associate Editor for the Financial Times, Rana Foroohar. And it's great to have you here, Rana. You've obviously covered the Federal Reserve extensively. Just on that scene first that played out today, have you ever seen anything like that?
Never in the history of central banking in America or possibly any other country have I seen anything like that. It was really, really unprecedented. And it was clearly good television for the president, but it does not make investors feel more confident about the monetary market or economic picture in America. I can tell you that.
And when obviously you heard from the president afterward, he seemed to soften in his criticism of Jay Powell. I mean, who knows if it holds? Obviously, he's been quite frustrated with him. But he came out of it after and took some questions from reporters and seemed to say, you know, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback. He talked about the construction side and what has been the centerpiece of this criticism from his own aides about, you know, how much it's costing to renovate this. I wonder what you made of just the outcome of this visit overall.
Yeah. So look, I mean, you know, is there a cost overrun in this building project? Sure. Is it larger than many other federal cost overruns? Yes. But that's not the key issue here, Caitlin. If you look at what the Fed is actually spending its money on, like hundreds of billions of dollars, it's on fighting inflation. Even this large, expensive project is a fraction of the money that the Fed has to spend every year. One of the reasons it's spending that much money fighting inflation, according to many economists, is political risk in America, which has risen under the president's second tenure, and tariffs and the worries over tariffs. And so the president has been looking for a reason that to accuse Jay Powell of malfeasance, of fraud. There doesn't seem to be any evidence here that I can see that would point to Jay Powell not doing his job, which is to look at the data and to try to make the best call about managing inflation and keeping employment where it should be. And I think he's doing a very good job at that.
Out front now, Dan Ives and Peter Tuchman. Einstein and Ives are with me, and you laugh at this, still employed. Okay. So, Dan, you got the markets today watching this whole thing on the screen. You have Powell and Trump in their white hard hats arguing over the cost of a construction project.
It's like a scene out of The Office, right? I mean, I think investors, the last thing they want to see is just a squabble. You don't want to see this for the markets, just given uncertainty between Trump and Powell. And look, this is essentially, it's theater. And the reality is that Powell being there and even trying to sort of argue with Trump on some of the, on some of the costs, I think that was a moment where he's not backing down. He's putting a line in the sand. And look, this is a soap opera, but this is definitely a Saturday Night Live type scene.
I mean, this was the guy that Trump put Powell in the job,
Correct.
just to remind everybody.
And he's done an incredible job. And, I was thinking about it today. The last thing you really want to do is to change the captain of the ship midstream here. That would make no sense. He's been through this journey since COVID. I mean, I don't know how anybody could think he's done anything less than a spectacular job, right? And I think he held his line exactly. The line in the sand here, he did have that smile at the end when he talked. But the fact that he went back at him
Well, it's okay. I want to play it again because first he shakes his head, and maybe he went into it saying, "Okay, I am not going to engage. I am not going to engage." We've all been there.
No, he's like,
and he's shaking his head, and then all of a sudden it's like, "I've had it." All right, let me just play it here again.
So great.
Right. So then Trump hands the piece of paper. We're playing with. Okay, this is the paper where Trump's like, "Well, no, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. Right? I got it. Hands it to him. All right, pals, pull out those reading glasses. We've all been there. Yep. Okay. No. Looking, and then he's like, no. I'm sorry. Wait, okay. You just added a third building. Okay, then he's like, what do I do with this trash? Because he's mad about it. Hands it to Trump, who is mad to be handed it, and then just hands it off to somebody.
His blood pressure is probably going up by the second there.
Well, you can see he's sweating.
Well, and also it just speaks. He doesn't want to sit there being. In terms of the grandstanding, he's not just going to sit there and take it.
No. And Trump then made a joke about interest rates. But I mean, afterwards, Trump's got to look back on this. Somebody made Trump look bad. Somebody made Trump look stupid by putting in a number saying, of a building, counting a building that was built, and then Trump stuck to it. He's like, no, we're building it now. And Powell's like, no, it was finished 5 years ago.
With the head of the Fed, you think he's not going to miss
He does not know
number?
Everything. See, he takes his job really seriously. I mean, that's the difference between the two here.
And to your point, the soft landing, he's engineering, you could argue, a top 3-4 Fed ever in terms of chair.
Look where we are. Look at where we are. We just came out of one of the hardest second quarters with all that tariff. Market was sold off 20.8% during the month of March and April, and we are now trading today at record highs, even in the eyes of all of
You don't take the pilot off the plane.
So let me ask you guys.
You don't.
Last night, and we've all known Mohamed El-Arian for decades. Okay, world renowned, was one of the top at PIMCO. Now, okay.
Right.
So now he's saying he doesn't agree with Trump's bullying. He doesn't agree with the full view on interest rates, although maybe he's a bit more prone to some lowering than others. But he thinks that Powell should resign because he says if he doesn't, this gets worse and worse. Eventually he gets kicked out. It makes it harder for the next person to come in. So he actually, for totally different reasons than Trump, is saying that the right outcome is for Powell to go away.
And Mohammed's the bet, and I get exactly what he's saying. But I think the reality is that Bessent knows, and that's why every time, you're not going to fire Powell. You don't want anything to disrupt this market. So I believe right now Powell stays to the end of his term. I just don't see the disruption here, and he stands the line.
The implication is that he's a lame duck at this point, and that whatever, if he does cut them, it's because he was told to by Trump, and if he doesn't, he's holding his line. And I don't think they'll fire him, which he said at the end he wasn't going to, and I surely don't think he's going to quit.
But I don't expect him
because he wants to finish the job. He's that kind of a guy who has to finish the job.
And I don't expect a champagne dinner after Powell's done between Powell and Trump.
No, but I am just wondering once today sinks into Trump of what really happened, that those numbers that he whipped out so confidently were just wrong.
I think
Someone gave him some
someone's
really
probably
wrong
been having
numbers.
A really bad day.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much.